Welcome again, children. In the previous video, we talked about the food chain, and we said that food chain is the process of eating and being eaten, right? That is what we discussed. And we said, we also talked about how the energy is passed from one trophic level to the last trophic level, how energy is passed, right? Then since we have already talked about the habitats, etc., so we know that in a particular habitat there is not only one single food chain that is there, right? So there are many food chains that exist, right? So since there are many food chains that exist, that means one particular organism can be eaten up by different organisms, right? So in this way there are many food chains that exist, and so the network of several interconnected food chain is known as the food web, right? So now we will talk about the food web, right? If you look at the diagram here, web is, you can see how the different food chains are all interconnected, which is forming a kind of a network here in the diagram, right? So various food chains in an ecosystem do not operate in an isolation. That means, number one, we must know that in an ecosystem there are various food chains that are present, right? There are various food chains that are present. Then we know that they do not work or operate in isolation. There are many food chains present. They do not work in isolation, and they operate in the form of a network of food chains. So how do they operate? In the form of a network of food chains, many food chains. They form a network. So they work in the form of a network. One organism, as I told you, may obtain its food from different sources, and in turn that organism may be eaten up also by different organisms, right? So it means a food web has several alternative pathways for the flow of energy, right? Since one organism can be eaten up by others, right? So we can say that a food web has several alternative pathways, right, for the flow of energy. So this is one organism, the energy, if it is eaten here, can flow this side, flow here, like this, right? So the food web also starts, right, since there are many food chains. So we know that a food web also would start with producers and end in carnivores, top carnivores, right? For example, if we take grass, grass is consumed by rabbits, right? So if we write here grass, right? Grass is consumed by rabbits, right? That is the herbivore or the primary consumer. Rabbit in turn may be consumed by hawk, right? Hawk would be the secondary consumer, right? Then the grass is not only eaten up by rabbit, this grass can be taken up by grasshopper also, right? The grasshopper is consumed by frog, frog is consumed by snake, right? So this is another, this particular producer can be eaten by rabbit also, can be eaten up by grasshopper also, right? Snake can be consumed by hawk, right? So in this particular picture, you can see the several interconnected food chains forming a web, a food web. Now just follow what I'm explaining. If we look at the A figure, right? The first food chain, A, the food chain A. So here it is seen that in this food chain, plants are eaten by rabbit. You can see here, this is the plant, the only producer that is shown in the whole of the food web. That is the producer. This is eaten by rabbit. Rabbit is eaten by hawk. right? So you can see here, this is eaten by rabbit and rabbit is eaten by hawk. This is one food chain, A, right? Similarly, now if we look at the B food chain, right? I am deleting this, and if we look at the B food chain now, in this food chain, plants are eaten by rat. Again here, the only producer. Plants are eaten by rat, right? And rat is eaten by hawk. So we can see that as per the A food chain, plants are eaten up by rabbit. As per the B food chain, plants are eaten up by rat. Now if we come to the seafood chain, right here, this one, this is the seafood chain. In this case, plants are eaten by rat. Again here, producer, plants are eaten by rat, right? And rat is eaten by snake. This is the seafood chain, right? Rat is eaten by snake and snake is in turn eaten by hawk, right? So this is another food chain. Coming to the D food chain, again producer would be the same, right? We're talking about the D food chain. In this food chain, plants are eaten by birds, right? You can see here, this is a bird. Plants are eaten by bird and bird is eaten by hawk. What we get to see here, this is the top carnivore, right? Bird is eaten by hawk. Let's see the next one, the E food chain. Here plants are eaten, the one that we had discussed initially, plants are eaten by grasshopper, grasshopper is eaten by frog and frog is eaten by hawk, right? So that is another food chain. F, if we see the F food chain, so in the next food chain we can see there is a little diversion that is there. Plants are there as the producers, right? They are eaten up by grasshoppers and the grasshopper is eaten by frog, right? And frog is eaten by a snake, right? And snake is eaten by hawk. So this is another food chain. If we look at the G food chain, G is here. Plants are eaten by grasshopper, right? So grasshopper is eaten by a bird, another food chain, right? And bird is eaten by snake, right? Snakes eat bird also. And snake is eaten by hawk. So that is another food chain. So what do we get to see here? That there are many food chains that are interconnected and one organism can be eaten up by many different organisms. So altogether, the network of food chain is known as the food web. Coming to the differences between the food chain and the food web, let's see the first difference. Food chain, we see, is a sequence of eating and being eaten among the living organisms to transfer food, energy. Whereas, if we talk about the food web, it is a system of interconnected food chains, right? So, food web consists of many food chains, right? Second difference, the food chain has a maximum of 4 to 5 trophic level, and that also we discussed that usually there are 3 trophic levels present and very unusual it is found 4 or 5 trophic levels, right? Whereas if we talk about the food chain, food web is made up of numerous food chains, right? Third point, we see that food chain is a part of the food web. And what is food web? Many food chains form a food web, right? Fourth point, food chains do not help in stabilizing population of endangered species. But food web helps in stabilizing the population of endangered species, right? The disadvantage of food chain is that the death or loss of one trophic level can cause subsequent, it causes loss of subsequent level of food chain. That is, if one level is lost, right, then the other levels are also affected. Whereas food web provides, if you see, the grass can be eaten up by so many different organisms, right? So food web provides alternative sources of food, right? So if let's say one particular trophic level is not present, then there is an alternative, right? So this organism, if this is not present, can eat this also. That is an alternative source that is found, right? So that's about the difference between a food chain and a food web, and we move on to our next topic, that is ecological pyramids, right? So ecological pyramid, it is a graphic representation, right? Graphic representation. You can see how it is represented here. This is a graphic representation of the numbers or amount of energy, accumulated energy at different trophic level, right? Energy present at this trophic level, energy present at this, right? Energy at this, and energy at this trophic level, right? In the food chain of an ecosystem. So ecological pyramids could be of three types. There are the pyramid of number, pyramid of biomass, and the pyramid of energy. So let's start with the first one, that is the pyramid of number, right? So the first one is the pyramid of number. The pyramid of number shows the arrangement of number of individuals of different trophic level in a food chain ecosystem, right? So you can see here the number of individuals in the different trophic level, right? So if we just concentrate on this particular figure, we see the base of the pyramid. This is the base of the pyramid. Now in the base of the pyramid of number, we see it is formed by producers. So you can see all plants over here in the first trophic level, right? The base, that, right? So they are the producers. And the top of the pyramid, this is the top of the pyramid. In the top of the pyramid, by the highest level of consumer, means this particular organism cannot be eaten up by another. So we say that the top of the pyramid, the place is taken up by top carnivore. So the base is the producers in the pyramid of number, and the top is the top carnivore. The pyramid of number indicates that the number of plants is very large. Now if you look at this, you'll see the size. The number of plants is very large, right? And they form the base of the pyramid. You can see the size here, base of the pyramid, right? They are eaten up by rats. This is the second trophic level, right? And which are fewer in number. You can see the rats are fewer in number by the size of this trophic level, by the size depicted in the trophic level itself. You can see that the number of rats are fewer as compared to the producers, right? They are in turn consumed by carnivores, right? So the carnivores shown over here, they are the secondary consumers, right? Snakes, right? They are fewer in number, still fewer in number as compared to the rats. And then if you look at the last trophic level, this top one would be the last trophic level, right? They are still fewer numbers, right? So one is shown over here, maybe one or two hawks are there, but they are the tertiary consumers of the top carnivores, right? Much more fewer in number. So that's about the pyramid of numbers, starting with the base, the producers, and at the top are the top carnivores, right? And the number goes on decreasing in each trophic level. The number of organisms that are represented in the food chain, or that form in the food chain, the number goes on decreasing, right? Next we talk about the pyramid of biomass, right? So biomass, what is biomass? It is the living mass of organisms, right? So what is biomass? Biomass is the living mass of organisms, right, of a food chain, present at any time in the ecosystem, right? At any time the living organisms present in the food chain, they form the biomass. Bio is life, right? This pyramid indicates the decrease in biomass at trophic level from base to apex. Here also you can see, if you remember the pyramid of numbers, the number of producers are more and it goes on decreasing. So here also in the pyramid of biomass, the biomass of producers, you can see that is the plant is the greatest, right? 1000 kg, right? Then it goes on decreasing. The number of rats are fewer as compared to the producers, so that forms 100 kg. This is just an example, right? the number of secondary consumers is still less, so 10 kg, and the top carnivore is just 1 kg, right? So you can see how the biomass goes on decreasing from base to top, right? Next is the pyramid of energy, right? So the next we will discuss is the pyramid of energy. So now if you look at this pyramid of energy, this indicates the total energy content at each trophic level, right? How much of energy is present at each trophic level of the food chain. It also tells us that at each trophic level, loss of energy and material takes place. That means, right, the energy is transferred from one trophic level to another trophic level, right? And as the energy is transferred from one to the next trophic level, the amount of energy goes on decreasing. Why? The amount of energy transferred goes on decreasing. Why? Because there is energy that is lost also, right? And during the transfer of energy is not 100%, right? So that is one point over here. At the producer level, again if we see, right, at the producer level, which is at the base of the pyramid, the total energy available is more than at the highest trophic level because of loss of energy from one to the next trophic level, right? So whether it is the pyramid of numbers, pyramid of biomass, or the pyramid of energy, right, the maximum is present at the producer level, which forms the base of the pyramid, right? If you look at the structure, this is a pyramid, right? That is why this is called the pyramid of ecology. These are called ecological pyramids, right? So that's about the energy point here, right? Next, now if we talk about the flow of energy in an ecosystem, right? We just now discussed that when the food chain, if we talk about, starts from the producers and ends at the top carnivores, right? In that, at each trophic level, there is loss of energy that takes place, and because of this loss of energy, the transfer of energy is not 100%, right? Out of this, there is something lost into the environment. So this, maybe it could be possible that only 90% of the energy reaches as compared to the producers to the next trophic level. Again, much is lost, right? So after it being lost, maybe even lesser energy reaches the third trophic level. So in an ecosystem, food chain represents a stepwise transfer of energy, right? So we talked about the various trophic levels, starting from the producers, we have the herbivores or the primary consumers, we have the secondary consumers, and we have the top carnivores, right? So stepwise, we studied the food chain stepwise, right? So we talked about each trophic level, and we also discussed how much of energy, we also discussed that in the pyramid of energy, that the energy is lost at each trophic level. Now, the green plants in a terrestrial ecosystem capture, please pay attention now, green plants in the terrestrial, that means on land, the green plants that are there, right? Suppose this is a plant that is there, a green plant, right? So what happens is that it is able to capture 1% of the energy of sunlight, right? So sunlight is important, we've already studied, right? Which is trapped by the leaves, and how much of energy is trapped? It is just 1%, right? So that falls on the leaves, the solar energy that falls on the leaves, right? And this 1% is used up to transform the food energy in the process of photosynthesis. Now when plants are eaten by herbivores, so plants we know are producers, right? So when these plants are eaten up by herbivores, right? Now that is the second trophic level. Primary consumers, the chemical energy in the plant food is transferred. So they are eating, so the energy is being transferred from the plants to the primary consumers, right? During this process, great amount of energy is lost as heat. So from their body we can say a lot of energy is lost in the form of heat, right? So it is lost in the form of heat. Where is it lost? It is lost into the environment. And some amount of energy goes into because digestion of the food also requires energy. So some of the energy is required in the digestion of food, right? A part of the energy is also utilized in growth and reproduction also, because reproduction is also one process that takes place, right? Growth also is taking place, and there's so many other activities inside the body. So for all that, energy is required. So an average of only 10% of the food eaten is turned into its own body, right? Its own body, and made available for the next level of consumer. So out of that 1% that is absorbed, the sunlight that is absorbed by the green plant, when it comes for the transfer of energy from producers to consumers, only 10% of it is transferred. So 10% can be taken as an average value of the amount of organic matter that may be present at each trophic level. Since the amount that is available, energy, goes on decreasing, we've just now studied in the pyramid of energy that the amount goes on decreasing at each trophic level. That means from producers to primary consumers, the energy transferred is less. Then from here to the secondary consumer, the energy transferred is less. So that goes on decreasing. So stepwise, from bottom upwards, the energy goes on decreasing, right? So the available energy, we can say, it goes on decreasing. And the food chain consists, we know, of 3 to 4 steps, 1, 2, 3, and the top carnivores, right? 3 to 4 steps. So much energy is lost in each step, right? That very little energy is usable energy that remains after the 4 trophic levels, right? So this was represented in the pyramid of energy. If we talk about the 10% law, that means we are talking about the energy that is lost and how much of energy reaches the next trophic level. Now this law was put forward by Lindemann in 1942, and according to this law, only 10% of the energy entering a particular trophic level is available for transfer to the next trophic level, right? So then, suppose, let's take an example. Let's here. You can follow the diagram here. If we take this example, suppose 1000 joules of energy, 1000 joules of energy falls on the leaves, right? So let's say this is the sun, and 1000 joules of energy falls on the leaves, right? Leaves of a green plant. Plants have 1% efficiency, so that 10 joules of energy is trapped by them, right, to produce chemical or food energy. Now according to the 10% law, what happens is only 10% of 10 joules of energy is available to the next trophic level, right? This is the amount of energy, but only 1% they are able to absorb. So if they are able to absorb only 1%, that makes it 10 joules, right? So now as per the 10% law, only 10% of 10 joules of energy is available for the next trophic level. That is 1 joule, right? So only 1 joule is available. So then the remaining 9 joule is lost into the environment during the transfer of food energy and respiration of an herbivore. Again, applying the 10% law on the remaining of 1 joule, 0.1% of energy is available. So if we look at it here, if I enlarge the diagram, you can see here how 1000 joules of energy is available for the plants, right? But out of this, only 1% is absorbed by the plants. 1% of solar energy is converted by plants into food energy. So what is 1% of 1000 joules? That makes it 10 joules. What happens to the rest? It is all lost into the environment, right? So only 10 joules of energy are available as food for the producers, right? Now what is the next step? The next step is that the 10 joules of energy, now the herbivore feeds on these plants, so 10 joules of energy are transferred. Out of the 10 joules of energy, only 1 joule of, as per the 10% law, only 1 joule of energy is available for food to the herbivore. What happens to the rest of the 9? We said that lot of energy is lost into the environment, right? So this is lost into the environment, or we can say it is used up for various processes also by the body, right? So as per 10%, only 1 joule is available. Now what will happen? This 1 joule of energy is available to the top carnivore, right? So when this top carnivore will feed on deer, only 1 joule of energy is available. But now what happens is, this, as per the 10% law, what happens, how much of energy is available for the top carnivore becomes only 0.1%. What happens to the 0.9 joules? It is again lost into the environment, right? So, like if we talk about the last trophic level, we see how much of energy is made available or left for the top carnivore is much less as compared to the energy available at the producer level, right? So 0.9% of energy is lost into the environment, right? And 0.1% of energy is available to the third trophic level. Now because of reduced energy available, there is small number of consumers, right? The energy is reduced, so the number of consumers, right, if you look at the top carnivores, the number of consumers is always less as compared to the producers, right? So at the highest trophic level, the number of consumers are less. So now what are the characteristics of energy transfer? If you look at the characteristics of energy transfer, very important thing that we must know is the flow of energy is unidirectional. Means it can be transferred only in one direction, right? So it is unidirectional, right? It cannot be reversed. No, it is unidirectional. The energy that is captured by the autotroph does not revert back into the sun, and the solar and the energy which passes on to the herbivores does not come back to the autotrophs, right? So it is not reversible. As the energy moves progressively through various trophic levels, it is no longer available to the previous level. Since it is unidirectional, it cannot come back, so it is not available to the previous trophic level. So that's about the characteristic of energy transfer. We move on to the next topic, which is biomagnification. Biological magnification. Biological, related to living organisms. Magnification, of course, increasing of harmful chemicals. Now what happens is the successive increase, successive from one level to the second trophic level. The successive increase in the concentration of some chemicals through different food levels of a food chain in an ecosystem is known as biological magnification. Let's take up an example. Harmful and toxic pesticides, right? Let's see here, like if we draw the plants here, suppose these are the plants that are there, and we know that these are the producers, and these producers are eaten up by various other organisms, big and small, right? So we know that harmful and toxic pesticides are used to protect crops, right? So pesticides etc. are used to protect crops, right? So and pesticides, I mean what happens is these pesticides, they manage to escape into the soil. Some of them are falling here and some may fall on the soil, right? So they may enter into the soil, or the soil may flow and enter into a water body also, right? Like ponds, lakes, rivers. Now these pesticides that are there are non-biodegradable. Non-biodegradable means they cannot be broken down into simpler forms by any living organisms. So they are non-biodegradable, and so these pesticides, they cannot be destroyed, right? So they will always be present if they cannot be destroyed. Now what happens is they enter the food chain at the level of producers. From here only they enter the food chain, right? How? By absorption along with water and minerals. From producers they enter into the herbivores, right? From herbivores it may enter, many herbivores would eat that. From there it would enter the carnivores, right? As they move up in the food chain, they become more and more concentrated at each trophic level. That means at each trophic level the concentration of these pesticide goes on increasing, right? So one herbivore may not just eat one plant, it may eat many, right? So chemicals are all going inside the body, right? In one case study, water bodies were found to contain 0.003 parts per billion of DDT, right? Use of DDT, of course, is now banned. The phytoplanktons, what are the phytoplanktons? Plants, microscopic plants found in water, and zooplanktons, microscopic animals found in water. They consumed this water, the water was rich in this. So they consumed this water, they were found to contain 0.04 ppm concentration of DDT in the bodies. Imagine the phytoplanktons and zooplanktons, right? They were found to contain 0.04 ppm concentration of DDT in the body. Small and large fish feeding on such planktons. See what must have happened is there are many planktons, and in the whole lifetime a fish would not be feeding one plankton only, right? From one plankton a lot of DDT has gone into the body of this fish. Now this fish has fed the other plankton, another one, right? So what happens? The quantity of DDT goes on increasing in the fish, right? So small and large fish, they feed on such planktons, and from 0.5 part per billion, part per million ppm, it will go on increasing to around 2 ppm. So one fish is not going to feed on just one plankton. Since it feeds on many other planktons, the quantity of DDT goes on increasing. So in that case study, it was found that from 0.04 it increased to 2 ppm in the tissues of the body of the fish. The DDT concentration reached up to 5 ppm in birds feeding on these fish. Now see, from small fish to large fish to birds, right? So how it went on increasing, right? So what is happening is that chemical is becoming concentrated, it is becoming more and more. The concentration of the chemical is going on increasing at each trophic level, right? At each trophic level it goes on increasing. This shows that the amount of toxic non-biodegradable substances, it increases with successive trophic level. Now man, all of us, being the top in the food chain, we may accumulate maximum concentration of such non-biodegradable substances in the body. The problem is that these substances cannot be removed from the food items, like we eat rice, vegetables, etc., by washing them or by any other means. So it goes on accumulating in our body, and in our lifetime we just don't feed on only one kind of food items. There are so many others of the same kind. Every day we need food, and every day you can see that the quantity of these non-biodegradable substances or chemicals will go on increasing in our body. So this increase, right, is known as biological magnification, right? There are different ways in which poisonous chemicals enter different food chains at the producer level, right? So if we just talk about the different food chains, from grass it may enter the cow or the goat, then it may enter the man. From algae in pond it may enter the fish. From fish to man, DDT in water may enter into DDT in plankton, from plankton to DDT in small fish, and from DDT in small fish to large fish, and then fish eating birds. So that is how it goes on increasing. So that's all for today's class, children. Please read this carefully. This is a very simple lesson. This 10% law is asked in the board exam. Biological magnification is asked in the board exam. Food chain and food web, the difference, please go through. Then since you've been studying this in EVS also, this is a simple lesson where you can score good marks. So prepare this well.